All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's on the Power. So in this video, I want to talk about Sergio Oliva Jr.'s appearance at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. Now, there was a lot of historic things that happened at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. Of course, you had Shawn Rhoden winning and preventing Phil from getting that record 8 Mr. Olympia. Shawn Rhoden also being the oldest Mr. Olympia winner in history as of 2018. But one of the things that I was most excited to see at the 2018 Mr. Olympia was the historic appearance of Sergio Oliva Jr. at his first ever Mr. Olympia competition. Now, this is a gigantic moment in bodybuilding history. Obviously, most bodybuilding fans know that Sergio Oliva Jr.'s dad, Sergio Oliva Sr., was a 3-time Mr. Olympia winner himself in 67, 68, and 69. But even more interesting, Sergio Oliva Sr. came back in 1984 to compete at the Mr. Olympia again, placing 8th, also competing in 1985 at the Olympia, taking 8th there as well. Now, the interesting thing here is that when Sergio Oliva made his comeback back in the mid-'80s, he actually brought his son, Sergio Oliva Jr., on stage as a baby. So the 1984 Mr. Olympia that year was held in October 1984, also the same month that Sergio Oliva Jr. was born. So he had just been born when his dad competed at the Olympia. So that brings me back to the 2018 Mr. Olympia, Sergio Oliva Jr.'s first ever Olympia competition. Now, this is bodybuilding history because this has never been done in the history of bodybuilding that a Mr. Olympia winner has had their son compete at the Mr. Olympia competition, let alone become an IFBB pro. There has never been a Mr. Olympia winner whose son went on to become an IFBB pro bodybuilder. So not only did Sergio Oliva Jr. do that, become a pro, he was able to make it to the Mr. Olympia stage. So I think he certainly deserves some props and recognition for that, regardless of how he placed at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. He did wind up placing 16th at the Mr. Olympia, which was effectively a tie for last place. But again, Sergio Oliva Jr. is a very new IFBB pro, and he certainly has time to qualify for the Olympia in future years and improve upon that placing this year. But I did think that as a fan of bodybuilding history myself, it's important to point out and to note that this was a very historic Mr. Olympia competition just for the fact that Sergio Oliva Jr. was even in this competition. Now, if you go back and look at these photos here of Sergio Oliva Jr. from the prejudging of the 2018 Mr. Olympia, I would not say that Sergio looked horrible here. I actually think he looked pretty decent. I think the one weak point for Sergio that is really holding him back is his back. I would say from a conditioning standpoint, he looked pretty good at this year's Mr. Olympia. But I think the reason why he placed where he did was more of a structural issue this year. His back needs improvement for sure, especially in that mid to lower back area. You can certainly see that's kind of a weak point for him. But overall, I actually thought he looked pretty good for Sergio Oliva Jr. I think the legs could use a little bit more size as well. But overall, his legs were pretty sliced and diced and conditioned here. So I think if we're going to see Sergio Oliva Jr. start to move up at the Olympia, that number one thing that he needs to work on is the back. If he brings up those lats and, adds some thickness to those lats, it would make some of the front poses like the front double bicep look a little bit better, where he looks a little bit narrow when he hits some of those shots. But overall, I think this was a good showing for Sergio Oliva Jr. I look forward to seeing where he's going to place in the future. In a very historic moment, I'm sure his father would be very proud of him. So thank you guys for watching the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.